Okay, you guys. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I'm excited because we're back to our regular strip club presentations. And this January, new year, new pattern, and my new fabric collection. So I get to show off the new pattern square pegs to you in my collection with Timeless Treasure called Tonga Fireside. Do you like it?
Yes.
Please always say yes when I ask you if you like it. I'm very fragile. So the quilt that we have on the wall is called Square Pegs, and it's available at your local quilt shop. And since we are your local quilt shop, you guys have the pattern in your hand. As you can see in the pattern, it comes in 5 sizes: lap, throw, twin, queen, and king. This is the throw size. It only needs 11 strips. I know, mind blower, huh? Well, first of all, it's set on point. And if you've ever worked with a block on point, you know that the quilt grows exponentially when you set it on point. Secondly, there's additional fabrics in the quilt. There are 2 background fabrics. Can you find the background fabrics? There's a light background fabric, which is almost a cream color. So here's your light background fabric. Your light background fabric. And then there's a darker. Do I call it darker? I call it medium. I originally called it dark, but it's not dark, so it's medium. So here's a medium background fabric. So light background fabric and medium background fabric. And then we also have an accent color. Can you tell me what color the accent is? It's the burgundy. I refer to it as red. Go with a generic color. So there's also an accent fabric. The setting triangles in our quilt are the same fabric as the light background, and then there's 3 borders. So you only need 11 strips, which is really nice because in these new strip bundles from Timeless Treasure, they come in bundles of 20. But the fabrics that you see in the quilt all come from the collection. So now you can pull out fabrics that may not have contrast to that light background, that medium background, and that accent. You can pull those out of your strip and not use them as your strip set. So you have options now because it only uses 11 strips for the throw. If you want to make the lap, it's 8 strips. Twin is 13, queen is 25, king is 35. So with 2 fabric bundles, you could make a king-size quilt just like this. You want to see how it comes together?
Yes.
There are 2 basic blocks in this quilt. This is, well, let me read the pattern, which I highly recommend. In fact, I write that in the pattern. How do we phrase it? We recommend reading through all directions before starting any project. Do we do it?
No.
Oh, I got some strong yeses and some strong no's. So first is block A. Block A is nothing but strips, and those are the 2.5-inch squares that you see, and then the medium background fabric. The beauty of this quilt is it's traditional strip piecing. You're going to put strip sets together with your fabrics, cut those into segments, and then sew the segments into blocks. The magic is the size of the strips, the number of strips, and the 2 different blocks that we're going to make. So if you've done any strip piecing, you just sew your strips together. This is medium background, a thin strip of medium background. Please refer to your pattern as the sizes because when I stand up here, my brain goes numb and I don't remember any numbers. I do remember, however, that we take our strips and we cut them in half on the fold. So we are going to work with half strips. We do that for a couple of reasons. One, they're easier to sew. So if you ever have the opportunity of sewing a strip set together as a half strip, it's actually easier to sew than the full 40 inches of a full strip. The other thing is you have more variety in your fabric placement because now you can put 2 different strips together to make a strip set. So we have almost a full half strip here, 3 strips sewn together. I'll tell you in the pattern the size your strip set should measure. It's always nice to check that you are measuring to that size since we are going to grow this block and keep attaching pieces to pieces. And then you'll cut it into segments. Those segments will look a little bit like this. Let's flip that around like that. And then we take a background, medium background piece, and we'll put it in the middle. So you can see with this, we have created the center of the block. And then we will we'll make more strip sets, larger piece in the middle now of the background, still our print strips on the top and the bottom for the strip set. We'll cut out segments. So now we have the outside part of our block. Can you imagine what happens next? You laugh because you can see it, right? You do not have to put tape with numbers on yours. In fact, it will just slow you down. So when you sew this block together, you will sew these 3 pieces together to make a square. You will add the top and the bottom to make a rectangle, and then you'll have 3 columns and sew those 3 columns together. And that's how you will make your block A, that looks like that. Print fabric, medium background fabric, block A. Do you see it in the quilt? Yeah. I'm going to put it on top of the quilt and see if it gets lost. Are you ready? Am I right? Okay. It's lost. Block B. Similar, but different. Different because the outside piece is now much thinner, and now we have accent on all 4 corners. The thinner piece, the thinner outside edge, is what creates the difference and the dynamic in the quilt. So here we have block B, and you see the tiny little piece here? Those tiny little pieces up against the 2.5-inch squares, it's what creates the sort of sparkle that goes on when the 4 corners come together. To make this, very similar. Sew your segments together. Not that yet. And you'll get a center piece. These are not 2.5 inches. Do not cut these 2.5 inches. This is not 2.5 inches. These 2 sew together. We'll make a 9 patch, kind of a Purina 9 patch. And then we'll add those outside pieces. When you cut your strip set, this is what your strip set will look like for those outside pieces. Big chunk of light background in the middle, accent on the top and on the bottom. From there, you cut out your very thin pieces. One will go on one side, one on the other side. And then you add top and bottom. Again, these 3 columns together, press, top and bottom, one section. Now you have 3 columns to sew together. Block B. The quilt is set on point. That means that instead of being a square, it looks like a diamond in the quilt. So everything is turned 45 degrees. 45, yes, because 90 would be that. 180 would be that. And 360 would be not getting you anywhere. So here we have in the top row, you need to think of your quilt not as straight set where it's rows. You need to look at your quilt and tilt your head. Actually, it's tilted this way. And you need to see the quilt so that the blocks are diagonal. Here is block A. In order to finish the row, you need a triangle on either side of the block A to complete this row. These are your setting triangles. So you need to add your setting triangles. I highly recommend laying out your quilt first. Make sure you like where the colors are. Make sure you alternate A, B, A, B. So in one row, it's all A, but in the next row, it's A, B, A. And then in the next row, A, B, A, B, A. I'm not going to keep going. You see the point. Every row starts and ends with a setting triangle. Once you have your row sewn together, you may have a little triangle flap, a dog ear that hangs off. Trim that off flush with the top of the block so you have a straight row. Then you'll sew your rows together. And finally, I'm like, what's this doing here? Oh yeah, I put that there. Here, I'll put this one here too so that it's all nice and even. Did it get lost? Yeah. Sort of. It doesn't look as lost because it's not quilted. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Once you have all the rows sewn together, only then do you trim the edges to even them out and add the corner triangles. Those go on last, and then the borders. It's set on point. Highly recommend you measure your quilt before you add your borders. Cut your borders to size. Measure your quilt in 3 places. If you're adding the side borders first, you will measure the left, the middle, the right. Take the average. This is for the top and bottom borders. Take the average of that and cut 2 pieces to that size. Add to the top, add to the bottom. Now you know you're going to help force your quilt square. And then you're going to remeasure and then add the side borders. Did you follow that? Did I say that right?
Yes.
I feel like I didn't say that right. You will measure left, middle, right. The measurement will give you your top and bottom borders. And then you're going to measure with the borders on, top, middle, bottom. That'll get you your sides. And then you'll add those on. And there are 3 borders, and I do recommend measuring each time you cut and add those borders. Once you have all that, it's going to be more square. Then you can do my favorite 3 words. 4 words. Layer, quilt, bind, and enjoy. 4 words. 4 words. So this is my collection, Tonga Fireside, and our new pattern, Square Pegs. Very good? Yes. Any questions? No questions? Because it's that easy. Now, normally, I get that single question, do you have it in another colorway? We're a little out of practice, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Well, it's actually good you didn't ask because the answer is no.
Oh.
However, I'm going to flip that around and say I may not have this quilt in another colorway. I do have this color in another quilt. So, more to think about. Over here, next to the quilt that we have up on the wall. This is a quilt, I think it's back from 2008. It's one of my mom's designs called Southern Comfort. Yes, Southern Comfort. You don't have to drink while you make it. Okay, I got to tell you, I didn't know it was a drink until like a year after we named it. So this features Tonga Fireside. And then if you span your eyes over to the left, this also features Tonga Fireside. Now this quilt was part of our Bel Canto collection of quilts. And I believe this quilt is called, don't tell me, Nocturne. Am I right? Am I right? Nocturne? I think that is called Nocturne. Now Nocturne is one of 6 patterns that together make that giant Bel Canto block of the month. So I have those that also show off how different Tonga Fireside can look in other fabrics. And for giggles, over here to my other side is the previous collection called Tonga Stonewash, and that's in Ensemble. Ensemble is the pattern name. It was also one of the Bel Canto blocks. So I may not have this quilt in the new fabrics. I do have those fabrics in different quilts. That works, right?
It does.
You'll accept that from me?
Yes.
Okay, my friends. No questions? No questions on the quilt, square pegs? Well, if there's no questions, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
And I invite you back next month for another episode.